This is Join Us in France, episode 72. I almost said 71. It's 72 already.
Oh, my God.
And Elyse is with me.
Hi.
Hi, Elyse. Elyse is a professional tour guide, art historian, and a good storyteller. And today she will talk to us about
all my favorite places or squares in Toulouse.
Right. Because we got this idea because around the internet we're seeing these articles about the most beautiful plazas in France.
In Europe, and the most beautiful this and the most beautiful that. And Annie and I have been throwing these articles back and forth at each other and saying, no, yes.
Yeah, we don't agree.
We don't agree. And so I thought that would be fun to do just for little old Toulouse.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, before we start the show, I want to say thank you, Arinda Dolter, for your donation. Very much appreciated. And also thank you whoever bought the GoPro on Amazon.com using our link. So if you go to joinusinfrance.com/Amazon, it takes you to a link. And whenever you make Amazon purchases through that, we get a small commission, which is lovely. Thank you very much. So thank you for your donations and your support of the show. Okay, we're done with the commercial stuff.
That's short.
Shorter than usual.
Short, yeah. All right. Okay. So we both know that on the list of the most beautiful. Well, I want to back up for a second.
Okay.
It's very confusing sometimes because in French the word is place.
Yes. Place.
Which means place, right?
Yep.
Which translates really in English as square. Even though some of them we know very well are round or oval or triangular.
or whatever shape they want to be.
Whatever shape they want to be.
Yeah.
And in Italian, it's piazza.
Yes.
So I'm not even sure really what the right word is to use.
Well, I say plaza, but I don't know if I'm right.
I don't think it is a plaza. You see, that's what because I don't think it is. And I'm not sure what a plaza.
There she goes, criticizing me again.
No, but
You're right.
my linguistical. I think the plaza is the equivalent of an esplanade, which is like a big open space in front of a big building. But I don't know if it's exactly the same thing as what is called a place in French. So what word should we use? That's my question.
Well, we could use a French word, place.
Okay. That makes it easy.
Because that's a place in French could be either a small one or a big one.
That's right.
Could be esplanade in front of a big, massive building or
it
not.
Could be a tiny little thing.
Right.
It could be official. Okay. Well,
so for the purposes of this recording, it's place.
Let's stay with place.
Yes.
That makes me feel so much better. Okay.
Anything for you, Elyse. Anything.
Oh, I love that, Annie. Okay. So we both know that our dear Capitole Square, which is a place, a very big one actually, is always included in the top 10 for France.
Yeah.
Some lists of the ones we saw the last week or so put it up near number 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think it was 4. Yeah.
And in another one, it was number 10. Barely made the top 10. I was like, okay, what happened there? So it is very famous, and it's very often included in some of these lists. But so that's really what gave me the idea of thinking about, well, what about the other place in Toulouse? Because it is something that is very typical of old French cities.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe we could talk about which ones particularly I like, and I might find out from you which ones you kind of like.
Very good.
And give a little bit of the history of a few of them, because we have to sort of make a shorter list than the full list of all the ones that there are, obviously. I'm not going to talk about all of them.
Yeah.
But there are a few that have a lot more interesting history, and some of them are obviously very, very pretty, and others are just interesting because of what their history is or where they are. So I guess we should begin with the biggie.
The biggie,
which is Place du Capitole.
Du Capitole.
Du Capitole.
Place du Capitole, de la Capitole.
De la Capitole.
Where did that come from? Place du
Capitole. I don't know.
Capitole.
Place du Capitole.
Yeah.
It comes from the fact that I tend to do all of these tours in English, and I'm saying, this is the Capitole Square, and I don't pay attention to my do's and do's and these.
Yes.
Anyway.
That's all right.
All right. Capitole. It is, of course, the biggest one. It's actually... Now, this is in hectare, so I'm not sure about the translation into acres, but it's 1.2 hectare.
Yeah.
Which is about 2 acres.
That's what I was going to say. It looks like about a couple of acres
it's
big.
It's big. It's not the biggest in all of France, but it is one of the biggest in all of France. And of course, it is the heart and the soul, really, of Toulouse. And on one side of it is the city hall.
Yes, I have memories going back to the Capitole since child baby.
Really?
Yeah. Because back then Toulouse was a much smaller city,
right?
And my mother used to take the bus and go do her shopping in the city. I remember as a very young child, we didn't even have big supermarkets. I was about 5, 6, maybe 7. I don't know exactly. But when the big, massive supermarket settled outside of the city, just outside, that we both go to, it was new. Before that, it was all small stores. And you went to the market in the city. So,
but do you have any specific memories about the Capitol Square specifically?
I remember when they remade the pavement, and when they added the big Croix du Languedoc,
which was in 1974.
Okay, I believe you.
Okay.
So I was 9.
Right.
See, I remember that. Other memories.
Just the activities or any events that
walking through
there?
it, going to the market. There was a vegetable market, and there was always the discussion of whether we should go to the one on Capitole or to the one on the boulevards. And the one on the boulevards always, is better anyway
because
for vegetables.
Cheaper. Right.
Well, for fruits and vegetables, it's better anyway. Right. So that was the consideration.
I guess it is true, though. I would say that for most people who have lived in Toulouse for a long time or even all their lives. So I guess there are not that many people anymore who have, but it is a reference. It's the center of the city. And of course, one of the things about it, there are two things. The two reasons I guess it makes the list, if you want to call it that, is because of the beautiful architecture around it. It's very gorgeous because it has on one side the magnificent facade of the City Hall, which is very famous. It's not my favorite style of architecture, I have to really be honest, because classical architecture I find a little bit too formal and cold, but it is very beautiful. It's very ornate with its columns of pink marble and its gold decoration.
It's colorful. See, I wouldn't call it cold because it's colorful.
That's true.
When it's all gray stone.
Gray classical is more formal.
But that one, because it includes quite a bit of
has pretty
brick.
Shiny things.
Yeah.
And of course,
I'll put pictures on the website, obviously.
The square all the way around, one of the things that really does make it very beautiful is that it's a uniform architecture that was all done not that long ago, because the actual buildings that surround it on three sides were only finished in between 1850 and 1860. Which means that it's fairly recent, even though the space itself goes back very, very far in the history of Toulouse.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really fun when you look around, for those people who probably have not remembered what was said when we did our little podcasts about Toulouse, Toulouse is a city made of mostly brick.
Yeah, and that was episode 31.
And the buildings all the way around the City Hall are specifically made out of brick, very beautiful old Roman-style brick, and they are made with either arcades that are real arcades that you walk under to protect yourself from the heat and the cold, or with fake arcades on the facade. And that was by order of the city administration to really remind people that this is a city that goes back way beyond the Middle Ages, so that they made everybody adhere to this style, and all the signs on all of the things that are around the square, which includes hotels, restaurants, now an espresso shop, and, God forbid, a McDonald's.
Oh, come on. That was my very first job ever.
Was it really?
Yes.
In that one?
In that one, the very first McDonald's in Toulouse.
And what makes it the only one that's really acceptable from the aesthetic point of view is that it doesn't look like a McDonald's, because the signs are in gold with the same lettering as every other building around the square.
It blends in pretty well.
Very discreet.
And it's been there for forever.
Is that really your first job?
That was my first job. I worked there for a couple of years.
How interesting.
When I was a student, so I was going to the university, and then I would either do the rush hour noon thing, which was a problem for me because my university was Paul Sabatier, so it was far. Comparatively anyway, or the evening. So I close up at night and
Right.
work till like midnight or 1 a.m.
Yeah.
They don't close that early anymore. They stay open till 2 or something now.
No, well, only weekends because
Oh,
of
okay.
the new law. But in fact, it's very funny because I don't know if this is true in other parts of the country here or anywhere else, and I really tend to only use McDonald's. This is a shameful thing to say, to get a coffee and go to the bathroom. But they don't
that's a
open
good tip.
until 10. So you
Right.
can't get an early breakfast there. But
No, they don't serve
They don't serve
breakfast,
breakfast. But one of the things about it is that, like all the other buildings, and when I do a tour of the major monuments and I point that out on the square, it's funny because people usually laugh because you really have to look very hard to realize that it is a McDonald's because it does conform with the beautiful architecture that goes all the way around.
Right.
Now, of course, one of the things about this Capitol Square that makes it very important for anybody who is in Toulouse is that it's where all major events happen.
Right. There's always something going on. It's really rare that you go. That's one of the problems because I want to take pictures of the La Place du Capitole, but it's hard. There's always tents and
Something.
people setting up some market or some event.
There's a musical event, or it's
Yeah.
when there's the finals in soccer and in rugby. They stick up a giant screen on
Yeah.
the front of the gorgeous, beautiful pink marble columns. You know, the Capitole are all turning over in their graves probably at this point. And of course, everybody comes out and watches the game. And on the opposite side from the facade of the City Hall are a whole string of very, very beautiful and relatively elegant cafe brasseries, and they extend their tables out. And it's very user-friendly. And when it's a political event, when it's the 14th of July, there's music until 2 a.m.
There's exhibitions. For instance, I'm involved with the school for the guide dog for the blind in Toulouse. And we often have demonstrations
Right there.
and fundraising right there.
Right.
And they just let us. I mean, we have to put it on the schedule, obviously.
Right.
But it's used by all sorts of associations, all sorts of groups as a place to go and
manifest.
Yeah, well, manifest or do events or
Right.
do
I mean,
gatherings.
the book, there's a book fair for a weekend that just happened. Everything interesting, everything cultural, everything political, everything musical, everything sports
and as a result,
happens there.
people will go to the Place du Capitole just to see what's happening.
That's right.
It's just people like my daughter who's going to high school. She's not right downtown, but she and her friends sometimes just get on the bus, go down to Place du Capitole just to see what's happening, have a meal together,
Right.
and then they go back to high school because they have on days when they have a long lunch
Right.
break, you know.
And of course, it's really physically in the heart of the old city center. So you can, in any direction you go, you have streets that have commerce, you have little cafes and restaurants. And the local lyrical opera house is
Yes.
in one wing of the city hall.
Yes.
The central courtyard is a magnificent Renaissance courtyard when
Yes.
you go in to visit it. So it's really, I feel like it is literally the pulse of the city.
And it's also the place where people hold their weddings.
That's right.
So there's a lot of wedding photography
And right
going
now
on.
that's going on.
Yeah,
Right? This
yeah.
is May.
Every day, yeah,
May
it's a
and
big deal.
June.
They schedule them like every 15 minutes this time of year. It's like boom,
And
boom, 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 boom.
It's exactly what it is. You know, it's really beautiful.
And the other thing I want to say, is that they have removed cars from Place du Capitole, which is a fabulous thing because there used to be 2 lanes of traffic going around the place, and it was dangerous. I mean, you know, so now the only cars there's only one way.
There's only one way.
I think it's just one lane, isn't it?
It's one lane, and it only can turn one direction.
And it's only to get into the underground
Into
parking
the underground
lot.
parking lot.
That's the only, unless you have a city, you're a city resident, downtown city.
Right.
And then you have a pass, because they've put these kind of
Those posts.
mechanical posts.
Right.
That will lower into the ground. If you approach with a car that has the right electronics, then it'll lower itself.
Those are for the people who either work in the area or were connected to the establishments that are around the square.
Right.
And, of course, one of the things is that there are two of the fanciest hotels in Toulouse that are right on the square.
Right.
And as a guide, I know that one of the things that has happened in the last 10, 15 years when they've revised the circulation and closed off a lot of things around the square is that there were a lot of complaints from the
at first, yes,
commerce and from the two hotels, because these are upscale hotels, and the clients were very unhappy about the fact that the buses or the minivans couldn't even bring them up to the doorway.
Yeah.
And they had to sort of drag their luggage.
Or taxis or whatever.
Or taxis. And, of course, they've modified it a little bit, and they've allowed those two places to have the code so that they can lower those little, whatever you call those. I mean,
they're like posts that go into the ground.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a big deal. And I was very upset about the change before it happened. The first time, because your whole life you drive through, you get into habits, you get into a rut of how you get places. And the first time I tried to go downtown with my car, and I got stuck in this they had changed the direction of all the streets, and I was like, oh, where am I going? What is
this?
Where are you
going? Yeah.
And I was so upset. But I learned very quickly that you just don't take your car into the historical downtown of Toulouse.
Well, that's a good thing to not. Right?
Yeah, if you do, you're going to get stuck behind delivery vans, and all sorts of bad things will happen to you.
Right.
And so you just don't. So
you just don't.
Now I just put my car at the massive parking lots around the freeways, around the metro system.
And then take the metro.
And it's so much better. It's so much better. So I think the plaza has actually been revived as far as usage just because the traffic, for the most part, is gone.
Yeah, and it's interesting because doing a lot of guiding work where I have to cross it or spend some time on the square and visiting it, there are a lot of photos. You can actually pull up some of them on the internet that show the evolution over the last even 50, 60 years of what happened. What's interesting to know is that the modern zodiac 12-pointed Languedoc cross, which is on the ground.
Right, we have to explain what that is.
Which is, of course, the symbol of this region, Languedoc, the area of the language of Occitan. It was the cross that was associated with the original rulers of this area, who were the counts of Toulouse. Mm-hmm. And the cross is an equidistant cross. It's not a Latin cross. Mm-hmm. And it has each of the four elements has 3 points. I don't know exactly how you would describe it else.
I'll put a picture on the website. It's beautiful. And it's totally the symbol of Toulouse.
And it's the symbol of Toulouse.
I had one around my neck for the longest time, and even in America, people saw it around my neck and said, "Oh, you must be from Toulouse."
And there you are.
And yeah, Camargue also has a similar kind of sign. It doesn't look exactly the same, but it's a similar.
Well, you know what? Just as an offshoot of that, but very quickly, because I would like to go talk a little bit for 2 seconds about the history and then move on to some of the other past.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the reasons why there's the same cross in the Camargue is because the Count of Toulouse, his territory went as far as Saint-Gilles and almost into the Camargue. Mm-hmm. So it's very possible that they picked it up from the fact that he owned this territory all the way out to that area.
It looks different enough, but just the idea of having a symbolic representation of the area is very much something that you find in the Camargue as well.
And one of the other things about the Capitol Square is that when they started digging to make the underground parking lot, which was starting in 1971...
my cat is attacking me.
The cat is attacking me. I'm trying to not make noise and just making some grimaces. Usually cats like me. Come on, Alice.
This one is...
what happened was that what they discovered, which is really incredible, is they found the pieces of the old Roman wall on the northern side of what was, of course, ancient Roman Toulouse.
Right.
And the gateway leading out of the northern side, which takes us out to the Rue de Tours and up towards Saint-Sernin. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there is a rule that started in 1948 in France that is now European, and it's called the Emergency Archaeology Rule, or law. Mm-hmm. And whenever there's a major urban project anywhere, if they find things that seem to be of importance for archaeological purposes, the project is allowed to be stopped, but only for 6 months.
Right.
And so it's delayed. It's postponed for 6 months while they take photos, do measures, take out pieces if they can, unless it's enormous, which in this case, of course, most of it was. And then the stuff is just covered over again. So when you walk across the Capitol Square, you are walking across the remains of Gallo-Roman Toulouse and the northern gate leading out of the city.
Right. We don't have a lot of remains of that in Toulouse. Some
Unfortunately,
cities
no.
have kept a lot of it, and Toulouse has not.
No, Toulouse has not. In the Middle Ages, Toulouse went through a major change physically and basically got rid of almost everything that was from the Roman times.
Right. Well, you have to. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but you have to. Otherwise, you can't grow the population. So you have to make modifications.
Well,
you have to make choices.
One of the things that they didn't take down, ironically enough, was the ramparts around the city. They didn't come down until the beginning of the 19th century, which is one of the reasons why Toulouse became a very congested medieval city. But in spite of that, where other cities opened up much earlier and broke down the walls much earlier, even Paris broke down the walls much earlier than that, what they did do was they really got rid of almost everything that was from the Roman times during the Middle Ages, because the city was so important and so busy in terms of being a commercial city, and because there was so little space within the space inside the walls, that what they did was, since the Roman style is to make everything very monumental, it took up too much room. And so little by little, it just all kind of got destroyed or by virtue of time taken away. So we have our wonderful famous Capitol Square, and I absolutely agree with you, and I agree of course with Marianne, your daughter. It's a great place to go just to see how things are, and every once in a while I'll just say, let's go have a drink on the Capitol Square.
Right.
Because I like people watching, and it's a really nice place. It's not, I don't think personally it is the most beautiful square in Toulouse. I think it's the most majestic.
Yes.
It's very big, but there's something that my only criticism of it is that it seems to be a little bit too mineral. There's nothing to relieve there's beautiful granite on the ground. There's magnificent stone and brick in the facade of the city hall.
No plants, no trees.
And there's no plants and trees. And that's my same criticism of some of the other major ones in France in general. So I like it for the feeling you get when you're there and all the activities. And it makes me feel like I'm a Toulousaine when I go to the Capitol Square. But aesthetically, it's not my favorite.
Okay, well, I'll let you get away with that.
You let me get away with
it? Yes.
Okay, so let me tell you, I'm going to talk about
some of the other ones you picked. Yeah.
So one of my two favorites in terms of aesthetics is Place Saint-Georges.
Okay.
Is the one that has a very beautiful mix of medieval houses and classical buildings, and has some trees.
Yeah.
And lots and lots and lots and lots of cafes with big terraces.
Yes.
And one of the finest restaurants in Toulouse. And it's not as big, nothing actually in Toulouse is as nearly as big as the Place du Capitole. But I think it's gorgeous. And I love the atmosphere because, number one, you do have the shade of a lot of beautiful trees that it mix around with the walkway. It is surrounded on 3 of the 4 sides by huge terraced cafes and restaurants, a couple of very nice restaurants as well. Not just, fun restaurants, but very upscale restaurants. And the mix of architecture, you have a few houses that are from the end of the 1400s with the half timbering on them. You have a few places that are from the 1500s, and you have 2 huge mansions that are actually from the middle 1600s. And so it has an elegance that I really love.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it has trees, it's when the weather is nice, starting after our basic 2 or 3 months of what we call winter here, when the weather starts being nice on a weekend, starting at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you will never see so many people packed together sitting in cafes as you will as Place Saint-Georges.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. And it will stay that way until 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Well, it's
really gorgeous.
true that on Place du Capitole, I mean, you bake. Unless they put up tents or, shade things. It's like, you're going to bake.
You bake. That's why the beautiful Café Brasseries, and there are two that, of course, are historical monuments on the Capitol Square, and that is the Florida, which has beautiful Art Nouveau architecture inside it, turn-of-the-century architecture from 1900, and the Bibent.
Yep.
Those are both listed as historical preserved buildings.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, both of them are. They
Okay, and if you have a choice of going to Florida or Bibent, which one do you pick?
For sitting and watching things, the Florida.
And see, I go to Bibent.
Well, you have more money than I do. What can I tell you?
That's not true. It's not. Well, it's true. I remember being shocked. I went for a coffee when I was young, and they wanted 5 francs for a coffee.
Well, I'll tell you something. I don't know if you know this, but you know the Bibent was bought and sold a few years ago, and it was bought by Christian Constant, who is a chef that's very famous in Paris. And so it's gotten to be even more upscale than it was before. But I happened to find that the Florida, there are 2 things, and we're moving back to the Capitol Square for those people out there who can't follow. I have to follow Annie's brain, and she's gonna. The Florida is bigger. It's centrally located opposite the city hall, and I love being able to have that perspective to look across the square. And when you go inside, the decoration is wonderful, upstairs and downstairs.
I don't think I've ever been inside.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. So that is why I prefer the Florida.
Yeah.
In general.
Okay.
Right. But Place Saint-Georges is interesting for a different reason. I love it's considered to be one of the most elegant of the squares or place in Toulouse, and there's a certain elegance in the feeling of it. And I just love it. I love the feeling of being in this world of it almost makes me feel like this is must be what it was like at the beginning of the 20th century in elegant European cities all over the place. I don't know. There's something about it I just love. And I don't usually go there for anything other than a drink. But I love to walk through it and crisscross it.
And there used to be a carousel on there. Is it there anymore? No.
Occasionally.
Okay.
There are 2 beautiful old carousels that are actually from the early 19th century, and they move them around, so one of them does sit up there. But what's also interesting to know about Place Saint-Georges is that it is the oldest open place in Toulouse, because the idea of an open space that we now call a square or a place is really very, very unique. I mean, in the Middle Ages, there weren't that many of them.
Yeah.
Because most things were either owned by the lords and the landed gentry, or everything was very congested.
Yeah.
And Saint-Georges is very ancient, and it was called in Occitan Saint-Jordi, because there was a chapel to the Saint Jordi there at the time.
Yeah,
and it is considered actually, it dates back to the very end of the 1200s as being the first open space, and it has 2 things connected to its history which are fabulous. One is good, if you want to call it that. One is bad.
Okay.
It is the place of the first open-air markets. And the markets that were held at Saint-Georges were not, as we now have in many places, fruits and vegetable markets. It was the market where there was a trade of wine, barrels of wine. We're talking Middle Ages now, and up through the Middle Ages. Also, all the poultry and game was bought and brought in and sold there. But also, and I had to look this up to make sure that it's the site of the very first, what we would call flea market. And in Occitan, the flea market, the word they used was the word in Occitan for proxénète, which, of course, and the reason Annie is laughing is because of what proxénète means today. All right, you tell them, Annie. Okay.
Proxénète is a pimp.
A pimp, right. Yeah. And it turns out that the origin of the word is that it's a person who is the middleman person who buys things from somebody and resells them. And there you are, right? Yeah. And so it turns out that the word was used for describing this market because it was the first time, it was a market where people would bring things that weren't necessarily brand new, and there would be resellers. And so for centuries, this market was actually at Saint-Georges. And it didn't move to where it is now. It's at around the Church of Saint-Sernin until 1889.
Oh, that's pretty recent.
It's pretty recent in the grand scheme of things in Toulouse. Yeah. So can you imagine that from the 1200s until 1889, the flea market
was on that
Place Saint-Georges, right? And of course, the way it looks now is very different because it's been rebuilt with those nice half walls that people like to sit on, and added with some landscape gardening, and it did not exist before. I mean, it was basically open. And the other thing about Place Saint-Georges is that up until 1780, and starting in the 1500s, it was the place of public punishment and execution.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Well, it was. And it was in partly not because they chose it because it had a certain quality, but because literally until a certain point in the history of Toulouse, it was the only open public space. Huh. So that was where they used it. And of course, because
a lot of gruesome stuff.
Gruesome stuff, not just, of course, in Toulouse, and not just in France, but until the very recent modern time passed, which means basically right up till about the time of the French Revolution, punishment was public. You know, it's true in England too. It was all public. Yeah. And so it was used that way at Saint-Georges till 1780, which is just a little bit before the Revolution. And one of the most famous stories or cases that have to do with punishment that are connected to the history of the war of religions, which is the case of the Jean Calas. It was the whole story of the persecution of a man because he was Protestant, and it's a whole other thing. We'll do maybe another story about things like that. Yeah. But that actually took place in 1762, right on that square.
Oh, wow.
So it's interesting because it's been since modified, beautified, made into this very elegant place. We don't do it anymore. And it's surrounded by some of the chicest shops in Toulouse.
Yeah, some nice restaurants and cafes.
Really nice restaurants and cafes.
No, it is a very nice place. Yep.
Okay, so
agreed.
Next one.
Yep.
Can't really leave it out. The Place Saint-Étienne.
Okay.
Even though most people think of it in relation to the cathedral.
Yes.
The place itself, which is very big and is actually in two parts. Part of it is in front of the cathedral, and it's really triangular in shape.
Yep.
Which is where the wonderful oldest fountain in Toulouse is.
Yeah, that is a nice fountain.
Called a Griffoul. That is the word from Occitan. How that word means fountain, I have no idea. It's nothing like the word fountain, right? Yeah. And it's nothing like the word X, which has to do with the word for water. So I have no idea. Yeah. But the cathedral of Toulouse is Saint-Étienne. Yeah. And it is on the eastern side of the city.
Yeah.
I had a little moment there. I had a blip. It's on the eastern side of the city, and the cathedral and everything surrounding it was originally built onto the old Roman walls with the eastern gate going out. So for centuries and centuries and centuries, the area was filled with little houses, typical medieval, as anybody can imagine who's ever seen even pictures of a dense medieval city. Surrounding the cathedral, there were lots of little houses. There wasn't very much open space except directly in front of the cathedral.
Right.
And that was why, starting in the 1400s, they opened it up to make a very nice big place or esplanade that basically is relatively empty, but what they did was the bishops and then the archbishops set it up as a space for people to get an appreciation for the entrance into the cathedral.
Okay.
And so it then in the early 1500s, they built this famous fountain. Now, this is a bit shameful because it has to do with something that has to do with the bishops and the church. In the Middle Ages, Toulouse had lost its capacity to have clean, drinkable running water brought into fountains because all of the old technology by the Romans had been destroyed.
Yeah.
And most people either had wells or they had to have either themselves or servants go down to the river and bucket the water.
Yeah.
And the water was not exactly the most clean, wonderful water.
Yeah.
The only place where there was a clean drinking fountain was this fountain, the Grifoul.
Oh, wow.
And it was for the people connected to the church.
Uh-huh.
That is, not just the bishop and not the people who actually were in the monastery buildings, but also all of the people who helped work in and around the church. So the community of houses that was around it they were privileged in the fact that they were the only ones to have
that had
access to water out of a fountain.
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
Yeah, I mentioned that the episode I did about the Pont du Gard.
Mm-hmm.
Because the same thing happened there. I mean, the Romans installed this massive aqueduct,
right?
And then they let it go. They didn't maintain it. They just.
Well, it wasn't the Romans who didn't maintain it. It was all of the invaders.
It's
right?
afterwards.
It's afterwards. Yeah, I mean,
the Romans kept it up.
The Romans kept it up, but it is really hard to understand, I guess, why all these invading populations, and there are zillions of them actually, maybe it wasn't a priority. They didn't know how to fix it. They were more interested in conquering lands than doing anything else.
Yeah, well, I suppose that in Toulouse, just like the area of the Pont du Gard, it's the Visigoths that came in after the Romans.
No, the Visigoths didn't come in right after. First it was the Vandals, then the Huns, then the Goths, then the Visigoths.
Okay.
But by the time the Visigoths came, which was really the end of the 6th century, pretty much everything had fallen apart. Yeah. And I don't think anybody even knew what to do to build it back up again. Yeah. They just kind of left it there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you can imagine that we're talking about a period of almost 900 years where the city is closed in and there's no running water in the city. And those people who are privileged enough, even wealthy merchants who had a little half-timbered house, which was pretty much a lot of the people in Toulouse, if they had a tiny little court in the backyard, they would dig a hole to see if they could get water. Because that was how they had to have, they could get their water. So, but what's interesting about the space in front of the Cathedral Saint-Étienne, which of course is now Place Saint-Étienne, is that it was really opened up starting in the early 1500s, made into something elegant. It is still one of the most elegant parts of the city of Toulouse. And to this day, surrounded on three sides by houses, some of which won awards for their quality because they've redone them. There's actually a house from the late 1400s. There's 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s houses surrounding this area. And this is all facing the facade of the cathedral.
Yeah.
But what has happened is that starting in the 1700s, they decided to redo the whole area, and they tore down what apparently were lots of very tiny little old medieval houses that are to the side, where there is now actually not just the place, but a park, if you can call it that, or more a garden, I think is more the appropriate word, which is on the north side. And so you have beautiful manicured little gardens there with benches. And you have the side doorways that I had actually just recently posted on Facebook with the color red, saying, it's changed its color 3 times since I've lived in Toulouse. What's the next color going to be? Because they keep changing the color on those doorways. But what they've done with that space is that they've made it into a space that's much more user-friendly, because the space around the fountain, there are no benches to sit on.
Right.
And on the north side, where it's very pretty with landscaping and flowers and some greenery, they put a whole bunch of benches. There's some trees. And you can sit there and really appreciate the architecture of Saint-Étienne. And then, if you want to, you can actually just go across the little street there, and there are 2-3 little cafes there. And I kind of like it. Sometimes when I want to be in a place where I have a little sense of greenery, if I'm in the city center, and I don't want the crowdedness or the noise of either Capitole or Saint-Georges, I go there. And I go there and I'll either sit on a bench and just kind of it's a quieter spot, and I kind of like the fact that you get this mammoth Gothic style cathedral, which is kind of a weird church, but it's a whole other story. Very, very strange church. Or I will just go and sit in one of the 2-3 little cafes that are across the way, and I really take it all in. And I find that it's one of the spots that I like when I'm in a mood to be in a more quiet
and
thing.
See, to me, that's the kind of place that I go across it occasionally to go somewhere else. I mean, there's also an underground parking lot right there.
Right.
So I've used that a few times. Also, the Préfecture is nearby, so I've walked across there just to get to the Préfecture for paperwork or whatever I needed to do. And so, to me, it's not a place where I just go and sit. No, I go across it. I've done that many times, but yeah, it's fine. Does it have like lots of people hanging around?
It does around the cafes, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And it's interesting because it's it's each square, if you want to call it that, has a certain kind of population. And there tends to be a fairly young crowd there. Maybe that's one of the things I like it.
There's high schools and schools around there.
Right. And a lot of the students from the art school come there, and people from the Augustin Museum come there and sit around there sometimes. Because in between you have posh buildings and posh shops and things like that. But this is just a little corner where I find sometimes I just really like it. If I have any reason to be in that part of the city in the morning, I'll go, I'm just going to sit there, especially in the morning. It's my morning. That's what it is. It's my morning spot.
Oh, you like it in the morning.
I like it in the morning. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'll go to Saint-Georges in the afternoon or a couple of the other places that I like in the afternoon. But that's my kind of morning. It's the light that hits it because it's the eastern side and all of that. So I really kind of like it. And, of course, I look at the church and I think about how in the recent past, in the last 35 years, they did a lot of work to They repaved when they put in the second underground parking there, and they discovered all kinds of Roman ruins. And so I kind of look at the spot and I imagine all of the history that's attached to it. So for that reason, I guess I kind of like it.
Yeah.
So, and then 2 others.
Okay.
We'll do 2 others.
Okay.
One that I think that we certainly cannot ignore, and that is Place Wilson.
Yes.
Which is probably the most fun.
Yes.
It's probably, in every sense of the word, the most fun place of Toulouse.
It's very much down the hill from where I grew up, and so I was there constantly.
And you were there constantly, I bet, and you could just probably roll down to get there, right? Just about. And Place Wilson is really fascinating because, number one, it is entirely a construction from the period of time between 1810 and 1830.
Oh.
There was nothing there prior to that. It was absolutely what would be called in French friche.
Uh-huh.
It was a kind of a terrain vague on the outside of what were the walls of Toulouse. And now, for people who don't know Toulouse, I'm sorry, you will not understand what I'm talking about, but this is a thing between Annie and I right now. If you imagine the corner of Place Wilson and Rue Lafayette, which takes us, of course, to the Capitol Square and where all kinds of things we know about exist. Right there was was the end of the walls of the ramparts, and there was a gateway out that side.
Ah,
and it was called the Ville Nouvelle Porte because they were planning on building forever and ever new things on the outside of the gates there.
Yeah.
And it basically didn't happen until really the end of the 18th century when they started doing major urban renewal work.
Wow. Talk about prime real estate today.
Prime real estate, right? And I got online, but I couldn't figure out how to pull it out. And I'll see if I can figure out it again. I yesterday was looking things up, and I found an image of the point of view from Place Wilson in the early 1800s, looking up towards where you grew up, where it was nothing. It was just a hill.
Oh, yeah.
There was just this big hill going out that way, and it was just countryside.
Yep.
And it was at that same time, in exactly the same time that they started designing the Place Wilson, that they started building the cemetery.
Aha.
Terre Cabade, up
yeah.
on top of the hill. So all of this was part of this major urban renewal project. And 2 things historically, which are really interesting because no one would guess and there's no sign anywhere on Place Wilson to indicate this. At exactly that spot where you have Rue Lafayette, which joins up to Place Wilson, which, by the way, for everybody out there, is not a square and it's not a round, it's an oval. Don't ask why. It's an oval.
Oh, it's not very oval. It looks like a circle.
It actually, there are photos that show it from up above. It actually,
it's oval, huh?
It's really oval.
Oh,
yeah, it's hard to tell, but
No,
because there's so many trees there, so it's hard to tell. But that is where this famous gate was. That is the Eastern Gate. The Eastern Gate going out. So what did I say? Why did I say Saint-Étienne is the Eastern? Yeah, wait a second. Jolimont is east?
I don't know.
Yes, Jolimont is east.
I'm very French that way. I don't use cardinal points to orient myself in the city.
Yeah, it is east. So
Saint-Étienne would not
Saint-Étienne
be east.
can't be east then, but it is. Because Saint-Michel is south, Saint-Sernin is north.
Yeah.
They may not be due north and south, okay? But basically, Saint-Michel is south, Saint-Sernin is north, Saint-Étienne is east. Okay, so Place Wilson is basically northeast, is what it is, okay? There was another gate out of the city there, and it was by that gate that in 1562, the Protestants were chased out of Toulouse during the War of Religion. It was literally by that gate, and it was by that gate that they were allowed back in. Oh. Now, I find it strange in a way, even though there's not that much in the city of Toulouse about the War of Religions, which was very important in relation to what happened. But there's no plaque or anything anywhere to indicate that any of these things ever happened or that there had been this gateway and wall right there.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yep.
So the bliss...
It's a beautiful plaza.
It's a beautiful plaza. And so what did they do? It was Mr. Virabon, who was the head architect and also had a company that made terracotta and brick and everything, who was given the job of planning Place Wilson. And it was specifically designed to be a place for people to go for restaurants, theater, cabaret, and the oldest cabarets in the history of public cafes. This is in cabarets after the Revolution. Were designed there, and the oldest one is Le Capitole.
Oh, yeah.
Which, of course, is still a restaurant there.
Yes.
And one of the other oldest cafes there is Les Américains.
Yes.
Which is right on the corner.
Yeah, it doesn't look like much anymore.
It doesn't look like much anymore because they made it into a horrible, ugly 20th century building.
Yeah.
But
it used to be nice.
It's got the gorgeous fountain of the last troubadour, Goudouli. Goudouli. Now, his name, it depends on whether it's in French or in Occitan, okay? Because in Occitan, it's Goudouli.
Yeah.
In French, it's Gaudoulin.
Well, French. Who wants French? He's a Occitan poet. He's a troubadour.
He was the last of the Occitan poets, and there's this gorgeous statue that was made in 1898.
It's lovely.
And of course, it's a fountain statue, which makes it even better. And it thrones over the square.
And it's beautiful.
It's just beautiful, white, absolutely gorgeous white marble. And one of the things about Place Wilson is that it's not big and airy. It doesn't have an open center. It's very dense. It's filled with sculpture, and it's filled with trees, and it's filled with benches, and it has.
And a beautiful carousel.
And a carousel that is one of the oldest in the area, that apparently is one of the oldest that they've ever had. I believe it's really from the beginning of the 1800s. Of course, it's been electrified since then. And it is still surrounded by restaurants and movie theaters and cafes. And at Christmas time, as all sorts of businesses, and at Christmas time, it's covered with lights in the trees because they have large trees. They have all these trees that are huge there.
Yes, and the apartments that are around that plaza are very nice because they all have super, like 10-foot ceilings and very old moldings. And
I've never been in any apartments there.
I've been in several.
But just like Place du Capitole, the buildings are all consistently the same style, and they were all designed by Virabon, and they're all very elegant, beautiful brick, and they're exactly the same. The whole thing is very homogeneous. It's just wonderful, and it's also it's there's something about Place Wilson, whatever it is, maybe it's because you have all of the movie theaters that are downtown, that are still downtown.
Yeah.
And you have all the restaurants, and you now have some ice cream parlors and
it's
everything.
Also more popular because the restaurants, I mean, it's like 500 meters away from Place du Capitole.
Right.
It's very close.
Everything is close anyway.
Right. But you won't pay the same prices. Like if you have a coffee on Place Wilson, it'll be a more affordable coffee, and they have all the food is
right.
also a little bit more affordable. People go for cocktails. People go for it's not fancy, but I have to say it's my favorite place in Toulouse.
I was waiting to find out which one was,
yeah,
and there you
that's
are.
My favorite, yeah.
I mean, but it is. It's like I get off the metro, I go there. Sometimes I go and get an ice cream. I just sit on a bench.
There's that. Is it Godiva?
Well, there is no Godiva's chocolate. There are now 3.
Oh, sorry.
Well, we have 2 that are genuinely made in Toulouse, glacier, ice cream makers. One of them is Octave.
Yeah, well, that's too expensive.
And then the other one is Cornet d'Amour, which is wonderful, which is a little less expensive. It is most divine.
Been to that
divine,
one.
Absolutely. I'm a connoisseur of ice cream.
Yes, I know.
It is divine. And now there's a Haagen-Dazs right on the square. And oh boy, I mean, it's just wonderful. And you can go. You can get a coffee. You can get an ice cream.
Which side is it on?
It's actually not on the square. It's 1 block away. It's right next to the Utopia.
Okay.
But it's wonderful. And
I know.
I get the cornet, and I just my the cone for those of you out there, and I go and sit on a bench. But and you go to the movies, and then you go and have a drink before, or you have a drink after, and it is. You're right. It's bustling, and it's next to the metro, and it's next to the movies.
It's more popular as far as.
But it's also wonderful. When I a lot of times meet groups, if I'm going to do any guiding in the city center, and I walk through Place Wilson all the time, and you see tourists, they'll just get something, a drink, coffee or an ice cream, and they'll sit there, and you see them, you can tell that they really are enjoying themselves sitting there.
You just sit there and you look around.
And it's packed, and there's a corner where there are people now playing chess, and I don't know. You're right. It's really, it's got this combination of kind of beautiful charm, and also there's just the life that it has there,
Yeah.
So it's also, no, just one more, because there are lots of little ones.
You haven't talked about the one on the other side of Place du Capitole, whatever that's called.
The one on the other side of Place du Capitole.
With the Donjon du Capitole.
Oh, well, I don't consider that a place.
But
because, I mean, I guess...
How is that not a place?
Well, now that it's been changed, I guess it is. But to me, the Place du Capitole... Okay, there are 2 things. One, when I say Place du Capitole, I really think of the entire thing. Okay. Really, the one that's the facade we talked about, and the mineral part where you have all of the activities and the cafes across from it. But I really guess in my mind, I think of the entire thing.
You include the other side.
I include the other side, which
because on the other side of Place du Capitole, they have this big place, to me, where the metro, you actually exit there when you exit the metro called Capitole, the stop. And they've added one of these wonderful fountains where kids run around in their swimming suits in the summer, and it's very fun.
It's fun, but I actually don't like it. And I think that I have a bone to pick with the city about it. First of all, I've lived in Toulouse now for 18 years. Okay,
yes.
I've seen them change that square twice.
Yes,
and I find that even though they added a small area, not where the fountain is, but off to the other side where there's now soft. It's a soft surface, so it's good for kids to play in.
Yes, a playground.
I actually aesthetically find it not very pretty at all. And also, I really object to the fact that they covered up a part that was a garden part that included vestiges, one of the only 2 places left in the entire city of Toulouse where there was a very beautiful, intact section of Roman wall that could be seen. Because when people like me take people around and talk about the fact that Toulouse was a Roman city, it was fabulous to be able to take people. Nobody bothered it. Nobody was doing anything wrong to it.
Yeah. It was
just there in the middle of the greenery on the section. And in the last 2 years, they just covered it up and added these little shrubs. And so, yes, they've expanded. They put stone benches in, a little bit more than they had wooden benches before. They've made it a little bit more of an open space where people can have certain kinds of activities. They have food tastings there. Like a few weeks ago or a month ago, there was a thing.
Yeah, they tried to include more activities.
Right, they tried to include more activities, and of course that's where the tourist office is, which is the old Renaissance tower.
It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful Renaissance tower building that was actually the donjon, was the archival building, and it was built in 1525. And so people gather together there when they want information in the tourist office.
I like that they have the kids area now. I really like that kids fountain because, little kids, they like to get wet.
Yeah, I guess so. But you see, whereas, you were saying about Saint-Étienne being a place you walk through, I walk through there. And I don't stop there ever. There.
And see, at that one, I will stop because of course, when I'm with, when I go downtown, it's often with a guide dog in training.
Right.
And the purpose is to, train the dog to do the escalators and all of the stuff that you have to do. And there's a place where the guide dog can drink. There's a place where I can get it wet a little bit to cool off. So for me, it's a good place. And I like to sit there and let the dog look around and sniff around and be calm around bustle.
Really. It's so funny because it's so interesting that I go through there relatively often on my way somewhere else, and I never stop there ever. And it's interesting because now they have two of these coffee wagons where you can buy a little coffee to take away and stuff like that. And there's a lot of my minor activity, which compares to the other side, but they have these little things going on there. So it's you're right. And of course it opens up onto the main commercial shopping drag, which is Rue Alsace-Lorraine, which they're trying to sort of make into a pedestrian street, but they haven't quite figured out what that means for them because there are still cars going up and down it a little bit. But
it's mostly pedestrian.
But I guess I really don't find it very pretty.
So that would not be a plaza for you? You wouldn't include it? Okay, all right, but that's fair.
I mean, you're right, it is, and I guess in a sense, but to me it's the back end of the Place du Capitole. that's I think of it as, that's where the artists who work in the opera house go out,
And to me it's the place where I always used to go sit. My mother liked to sit on these benches. Yeah. I mean, there's been different kinds of benches forever.
Well, I remember my first time through Toulouse, which was a longer time ago, and I remember loving to see all these older people sitting on the benches there.
Exactly.
And I think that's the other thing, that no longer do you see that. You see that a little bit more Place Wilson. The old guys, and stuff like that. But there it's more now either tourists or people bringing their kids there.
Yeah, it's turned into more of a kids area. Yeah.
So interesting though, but it is true in my mind. I think of it just as the back end of the Place du Capitole.
But what's interesting in this conversation to me is that all these places have a lot of life to them.
Yeah.
They bring back memories of, you go to a certain place to do a certain thing or to experience a certain ambiance.
Right.
And they're all kind of different.
And they're all different.
And there's one I bet you're not going to mention.
Well, I was going to talk about a couple of just small ones, and then I think we have to stop.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite of the small ones is Place de la Trinité.
Place de la Trinité, yes. It's a very cute little thing.
And it's beautiful. And, of course...
That's the one that has a cute little...
the wonderful fountain. Yes, it's a gorgeous fountain.
Yeah.
And Place de la Trinité, interestingly enough, of course, it's a triangle.
Yeah.
And it was designed in the early 1800s. They actually tore down a whole bunch of old medieval houses. And it was added on when they were starting to add beautiful fountains back into the city. As soon as they figured out with the Château d'Eau how to pump water back into the city, they started building fountains so that people could have clean drinking water in the city. And so that was when they asked Virbon, who was the same person who designed Place Wilson, to design a Place de la Trinité. And so several of the buildings have been changed and made into, actually, unfortunately, really ugly 20th century structures, but there are still 2 or 3 of the gorgeous, beautiful early 19th century apartment buildings that he designed. made of brick with some beautiful statuary work on them and terracotta work.
Now, how do you spell Virebent?
Virebent.
Okay. That's how I thought it was.
Yeah. And he, and the fountain was designed by Urbain Vitry, who was his nephew.
Oh.
Who was also in charge of doing major urban renewal work and architectural work. And it's very popular because it's a great place to have lunch. It's got lots of little cafes around it. It's very
quieter. I mean, there are cars, but...
There are very few cars, actually, very few. It's largely pedestrian. The fountain is incredible. It's a huge fountain. It sort of thrones, it really dominates the center of this little place. And it's got, two of the buildings are gorgeous. One of them has these magnificent Art Nouveau bay windows that is also from the very end of the 19th century. Reminds me, in fact, that building does remind me a lot of Barcelona. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other one across from it, basically, which is really interesting. And, of course, it opens onto some of the most wonderful of the old medieval streets that takes you into the heart of that medieval part with the... filled with little shops and restaurants.
Yeah.
And it's an area for all the years when I was teaching at the art school, it was my place to go for lunch. And I loved it because if I wanted to, I could just get a sandwich, or if I wanted to, I could sit in one of the other places and get a nice, real, full lunch. And it's very, very busy and bustling. And it's one of the few squares on a Sunday morning that has some cafes that are open. Other than the cafes that are, Place Wilson, of course, is open all the time.
Yeah.
Other than the areas around the markets. When you have the food markets, the cafes around the food markets are open. But otherwise, a lot of the city is pretty dead on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And this is one of those places where you have a couple of them that are open. And I find it very charming. No trees, unfortunately.
No, yeah.
But there's a little... I like it. There's something about it. And especially, I think, because of the fountain, which is just so impressive.
Yeah, I agree. It's a pretty plaza. It's a very nice. Okay, I have to add one more.
Yours.
Completely different. And I don't even like it. But it's called La Place de l'Europe.
Oh.
And it is...
I know where
out
it
by
is.
Compense-Cafarelli.
Right.
And the reason why I mentioned that one, it's a big,
very big
mineral, you would call it, plaza.
Yep.
Not particularly pretty.
Probably as big or bigger than the Capitole, actually.
Yes, but it's important because they do all sorts of activities for teenagers.
Oh.
So they will have people will go do the get-togethers of people doing big rollerblade things or bike rides or unicycles or jugglers or people like that who like to do this kind of thing. It's their meeting point.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so it's important because it's it's close to the business school.
It's close to the business school. It's close to TBS. It's close to the gorgeous park of Compense with its Japanese garden.
And so this is one where it was completely dead when they first built it with buildings very modern buildings surrounding it. It was just dead, and then they started giving it over to young people to organize get-togethers, to do kind of a little bit dangerous things that you wouldn't want to do on Place du Capitole because people would get hurt. I mean, if you have people zooming around on unicycles everywhere, it would be bad.
But do you know what it's interesting because I would never have actually thought of it because I guess it's eccentric in the sense that it's off to the side in terms of the city.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But the history of the Place de l'Europe is that it was part of the army base that was there.
That's right.
And when they destroyed the army base, which is when they built the Park of Compense in 1980, 1981,
yes,
that is the part that they left open. It had been open, and one side is still the barracks buildings.
Yes.
So it was, in fact, part of the military starting in the 1700s up through 1980.
Right.
And then, of course, they tore down all of the rest of the army base, and they made the business school, and they made the park, and all of that. But it is a very big... I know that they often have a fair there.
Maybe.
At some point
it's not as
in the
bustling,
year.
but if you want to learn how to rollerblade or unicycle, that's where you go. And you'll always find somebody who's testing something and who will usually come up to you and they say, do you need help? Do you need to, you want me to show you or whatever? I mean, I tried to rollerblade with my daughter, and that was funny.
Can we mention just one more?
Sure,
because I know
sure.
We have
we'll
to
finish
stop
with
it.
that
We
one.
have to.
Yeah.
Place Saint-Pierre.
Ah, yes.
We have to talk about Place Saint-Pierre.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay?
Go ahead.
So, I mean, there are actually a lot of others. When I started making the list the other day, I thought,
many.
There are really a lot, even though a lot of them are actually quite small. But Place Saint-Pierre is the heart of college life. And it's interesting because it has a huge history attached to it. It is the only one of the squares that we have talked about that is on the Garonne River.
Yep.
That actually faces the Garonne River. It is it opens up onto the bridge Saint-Pierre, which is one of the bridges that crosses the Garonne River.
Yep.
And it is also right next to where the river joins up to a section of the canal. Mm-hmm. But what has made it very popular and very, very important in terms of the life of the city of Toulouse is that it's surrounded by sports bars. Mm-hmm. And 2 or 3 of them are big. And when there's any kind of sports activity, the young people, and there are lots of young people in Toulouse, lots and lots, the university students who are not from far away because all of the social sciences are right around the corner.
The conservatory is right there.
The conservatory, the music conservatory is right there. The nursing school is right there. High school students from all over. Everybody converges there to hang out and watch the sports. And it's just a pack of incredible cafes.
But they have had to recently send more police because
they've been having problems.
Well, there's been accidents with people getting
too drunk
and falling down the wall.
Right.
And so they police it a lot more than they used to. It used to be like
it was fun.
Big party and everybody drunk and
drunk. I don't know. Now this is a
late
question.
At night.
This is a question for you because of the difference growing up. What was it like there?
Much calmer.
Much calmer.
It was the place where you went for the conservatory. It was tame.
It was tame.
Yeah, now it's gotten wilder.
Yeah, but when I first arrived in Toulouse, it wasn't quite that wild. It was just a fun place to go. They've sort of transformed it. But the other thing about it, and this is, I guess, one of the reasons why I find it an interesting square, is that it houses just vaguely off to the side, one of the most beautiful and one of the oldest churches in Toulouse, which is Saint-Pierre-des-Cuisines.
Yes.
And
which is a concert hall now.
Which is a concert hall, but is also visitable one day a week because on the lower level, under the ground floor, they have discovered a section of Roman road and part of the necropole that belonged to it when it was a Visigoth church in the 500s.
Oh, wow.
And it has a history that is extremely rich. And so does the square itself. And unfortunately, Saint-Pierre-des-Cuisines is an example of what is really something, unfortunately, the city shouldn't do, as far as I'm concerned, which is I have lived here and seen it transformed 4 times.
Yeah.
Parking lot, rose garden, parking lot again. Now they're in the midst of doing something to it. I have no idea what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They've built the steps going down to the river on the side, which is fine, except that, as you say, with all the cafes where the young people have a tendency more than before to get rowdy and a little bit too drunk on beer, I'm not sure if that's such a great idea.
Yeah.
But historically, it's an extraordinarily important spot in the history of Toulouse because it's where the Visigoths had their capital and it's where the kingdom came from, literally. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of stuff under the square there.
Yeah.
If you dig down not even more than 2 meters, you have chunks of the magnificent palace that existed right there. When they redid the conservatory and they tore down the old hospital buildings, they found chunks of the Visigoth palace. It's surrounded by history. And the only place that you really get a reminder of that is in the Church of Saint-Pierre-des-Cuisines. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of strange for me because very often I like to stroll along the river. And if you walk from Dorade or from Pont-Neuf and you go down towards Saint-Pierre-des-Cuisines and stop at the square there, I kind of feel sad that they didn't do something else with it other than turn it into a place that is just become a big kind of beer hangout spot.
I think it'll calm down. I think the city is really... They've had a few kids kill themselves.
Oh, have they?
Yeah. Just
really?
accidents. But it's... Yeah, I think the city is going to crack down and calm things down and force the bars to police who they serve and how much they serve quite a lot more. Because, I mean... Recently, if my daughter told me I'm going down to Saint-Pierre-des-Cuisines for a party with friends, no, you're not.
Yeah,
because it's just too.
It's gotten
too
to
much.
Be too bad.
It's too much.
The other thing, of course, is that Toulouse is now trying to create a file to be presented as a site for the World Heritage UNESCO sites.
I see.
And in order to do that, they have to fix all of that stuff up and clean up all of that stuff too.
Yeah. Well, it's not ugly, but it's just... Oh, and I just read recently that some homeless people that have dogs in this
took
area.
Residence there.
Well, and they kind of live there. They sleep there along the banks of the river, and one of the dogs... So it's not known if the dog got loose or got loosened on purpose, but bit a police officer... badly, because these are pack dogs. And again, I know this because I know the places where I don't want to go with a guide dog, because I don't want the guide dog to be attacked. And so that's one place where I wouldn't go either for that reason. I mean, if you're not with a dog, they're not going to hurt you.
Okay, so I guess that wasn't such a good idea to finish with Saint-Pierre.
No, it's a very nice place, but I think I would maybe, give it a little time to sort itself out.
Yeah, I guess it's not a place I go to sit. Okay, it's not like Saint Georges, Trinity, or even Saint Etienne. It's a place that I walk across.
You're too old, sweetheart.
It's aside from the fact
and
that
not homeless.
Last year we went once for some reason to watch something in the courtyard of because there's one of the bars that has a outdoor screen. Has a very nice outdoor kind of back terrace, and it was kind of nice, and it was fun. But I looked around and I thought, oh my God, we're like 3 times older than everybody in this place. I'm surprised they actually let us in. It's like, God, we have to show them our ID. Only this time it's like, you're not old enough. No, it's like, you're too old. Get out of here. But it's kind of I like, because it's part of an area that has a lot of history attached to it, and it's interestingly shady, and the water is pretty there. Yeah. So and so there you are.
Well, beautiful. Toulouse is a beautiful place. If you are coming by, please take a tour with Elyse. She's awesome. She knows it inside and out and backwards. So to do that, they can just find you on Facebook.
Find me on Facebook, or just
you have a website too.
My Toulouse Guided Walks.
There you go. So she's awesome. So you need to do that someday. Toulouse is a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful city.
It's really not very touristy.
No,
but
people always, in the last month or so, I've had a few people do private tours with me that have contacted me by either the website or whatever.
Yeah.
And every single time they end by saying, I didn't realize it was such a beautiful city.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did this. Yeah. And I think, wow, what do? We have to figure out how to get this out there into the public more,
It's a city that's busy living and not so busy talking about itself. I guess. It's very... It's bustling. It's got a lot of things happening, and that's why it's not. It doesn't concentrate very much on tourism.
No, it doesn't, and it's a very lively, very beautiful city.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I lost my voice.
You sound like a frog.
I'm frogging it. It's the end of the podcast.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Elyse.
It was
fun.
My pleasure.
Yes, and we will. Talk to you soon.
Yes, very soon.
Very good. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
This brings us to the end of another episode of the Join Us in France Travel podcast. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful time preparing your trip to France. And remember, if you want to talk back, I love to hear from listeners. You can ask questions on joinusinfrance.com or follow me on Twitter @ParisPodcast. or search for Join Us in France Travel Podcast on either Facebook or Google+. And if you're old school like me, you can also email Annie@joinusinfrance.com. I want to thank listeners who support the podcast by going to joinusinfrance.com/support. By doing that, you can help us earn a sales commission from retail giant Amazon. So before you buy anything on Amazon, go to joinusinfrance.com/Amazon, click on your country flag, make your purchases in the usual way, and then we earn a small commission because we sent you there. It doesn't cost you a penny more, and so it's a really good win-win situation. But remember, first you have to go to joinusinfrance.com/Amazon. Thank you. Talk to you soon.